Welcome to Kalen After Midnight, soft stories under moonlight. The secret I wasn't supposed to inherit. They say you can never truly go home again, but they never tell you why. It wasn't because the house changed or the streets got smaller. It's because home is a story you told yourself, and once you realize the story was a lie, the coordinates just don't work anymore. I hadn't been back in 5 years. I'd built a life 3 states away, a life made of glass and steel and people who didn't know my middle name. I liked it that way. In the city, you are who you say you are. In this town, well, you are who your grandfather was and who your mother wanted you to be. I came back for the funeral of a man who was the closest thing I had to a moral compass, Mr. Henderson. He was the high school librarian, the man who gave me my first notebook and told me my thoughts were worth writing down. When I heard he passed, I felt a debt pull at my chest. I thought I'd stay for 48 hours, just long enough to pay my respects, hug the right people, and vanish before the town could pull me back into the version of myself I'd outgrown. But funerals rearrange things you thought you had settled. The service was beautiful in that hollow, practiced way small towns do best. Polished wood, heavy lilies, and a choir that hit the notes but missed the soul. It was afterward, in the church basement, where the air started to turn. If you've never been to a small town funeral reception, you won't know the smell. It's a mix of damp coats, industrial floor wax, and coffee so weak it looks like tea. We were sitting in those beige folding chairs, the kind that groan when you move, set too close together. I was cornered by Mrs. Gable and Martha. They had known me since I was in diapers. They did the usual rounds. "Oh, you look so thin. Are you eating enough in that city? It's a shame you didn't come back sooner." I smiled and nodded, playing the role of the prodigal daughter. But then a name dropped, a name that shouldn't have been in the same sentence as Mr. Henderson. "Oh, it's a blessing he didn't have to carry the secret of Sarah's boy to the grave alone," Martha whispered, her hand trembling as she reached for a sugar packet. Mrs. Gable cleared her throat sharply, a sound like a shotgun in the quiet room. She looked at me, her eyes widening. She stopped mid-sentence, her mouth hanging open, like she could physically reach out and pull the words back into her throat. But she couldn't. That was the first crack. Sarah was my mother, and I didn't have a brother. Grief has a way of loosening tongues, especially when people assume you already know the truth. They thought I was the part of we. They thought I had been in on the arrangement all those years ago. I didn't push. I didn't scream. I just leaned in and lowered my voice, using that same quiet tone they used. "It was a lot for him to handle, wasn't it?" I prompted. And the floodgates opened. There's a particular kind of betrayal that comes from realizing your life was a curated exhibit. My mother hadn't left town for a long summer when I was 10 because she was sick. She had left to hide the fallout of a scandal that would have ruined our family standing. And Mr. Henderson, the moral compass, was the one who had brokered the deal to keep the truth from me. They did it for the greater good. They decided I was too fragile to handle the reality of who my parents really were. They chose what I could handle without ever asking me if I wanted to carry the weight. The secret wasn't cruel in its intent. It was practical. It was calculated. It was a community-wide effort to keep a good girl from seeing the cracks in her foundation. Suddenly, 20 years of my life made sense. The sudden distance from my cousins, the silence every time I asked about that summer, The way the neighbors looked at me with a pity that felt like a layer of dust I could never wash off. I wasn't loved. I was a project. I was a narrative they were all collectively editing. I stayed one more night, then another. I didn't go to the family dinner. I didn't call my mother. I just walked the streets of the town. I stood on the corner of 4th and Main and watched the people go by. For the first time, I wasn't seeing neighbors. I was seeing co-conspirators. I noticed who avoided my eyes when I walked to the diner. I noticed the relief on the face of the local lawyer when I told him I was just clearing out some of Mr. Henderson's old books. Some truths don't demand a confrontation. They don't need a dramatic scene in the middle of the street with rain pouring down. Some truths just demand acknowledgement. They demand that you look at the lie, call it by its name, and refuse to let it govern you anymore. When I finally drove past the Welcome To sign on my way back to the city, I didn't feel anger. Anger requires an investment in the people you're mad at. I felt light. The past didn't change. My mother was still the woman who lied, and Mr. Henderson was still the man who helped her. But I had changed. I was no longer the fragile glass girl they were so afraid of breaking. I realized then that not everyone deserves your truth. Some people are so committed to the version of you they created, they wouldn't recognize the real you if you stood screaming in front of them. I left the secret in that church basement, buried under the smell of lilies and weak coffee. They can keep their greater good. I'll take my peace. Thank you for joining Kalen After Midnight.